I thought the cheap pizza for my 18th birthday was the best gift my poor parents could give me. I was wrong. Their real gift was abandoning me in that restaurant and vanishing from my life without a trace. My entire childhood smelled like secondhand smoke and secondhand clothes. I was the kid wearing his dad's threadbare flannels to school, the one whose new bike was a rusted piece of junk I found by a dumpster. We moved every few months, a chaotic shuffle between different shabby rental units, always one step ahead of a landlord. I learned to never get too comfortable, to never make friends I'd just have to leave behind. But for my 18th birthday, they surprised me. Mom said, with a strained smile, "We're going out to a real sit-down pizza place." It felt like winning the lottery. The restaurant was a chain, all red vinyl and plastic checkered tablecloths, but to me, it was the pinnacle of luxury. We ordered a large pepperoni and a pitcher of soda. I was so happy, so stupidly, naively happy, savoring every greasy bite. About halfway through the meal, my dad wiped his mouth and said, "Well, son, you're a man now." He and my mom exchanged a look I was too excited to decipher. "We're just going to the restroom. We'll be right back." I nodded, my mouth full of pizza. I sat there, counting the pepperoni slices left on my plate, planning how I'd get the last one. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The pizza grew cold on the tray. The waiter started giving me sideways glances. A cold, sharp dread began to prickle at the back of my neck. They never came back. And that's when the waiter came over, slapped the bill on the table and said, "Whenever you're ready, pal." I looked down at the $28.75 check, a sum that might as well have been $1 million. My wallet was empty. I had nothing. My parents were gone, and I was alone, staring at a bill I couldn't pay. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I mumbled, "Okay," to the waiter, my face burning with a shame so hot I thought I might combust. I waited until he was helping another table. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I stood up, trying to look casual, and walked straight out the door, not looking back. I half ran, half walked the 20 blocks back to our latest rundown apartment, my mind racing with 1,000 excuses for them. Maybe there was an emergency, a car accident, maybe they'd gotten sick. Anything but the terrifying truth that was solidifying in my gut with every step. I fumbled with the key, my hands shaking, and pushed the door open. The silence that greeted me was absolute and heavy. The living room was empty, not just tidy empty, but hollowed out empty. The ugly floral couch was gone. The TV with the coat hanger for an antenna was gone. I ran to my bedroom, my mattress on the floor, the cardboard box I used as a dresser, all of it gone. The walls were bare. The only thing left was a single worn-out sock in the middle of the floor. It felt like a punch to the throat. They hadn't just left me at the pizza place. They had erased our entire life, and me along with it. There was no note, no explanation, just that deafening, empty silence. The next morning, a pounding on the door jolted me awake from the floor where I'd spent the night. It was the landlord, Mr. Henderson, his face a thundercloud. "You," he spat. "Your parents are 2 months behind on rent. I've evicted them. They cleared out in the middle of the night like the cowards they are. Now, you get your stuff and get out too before I call the cops." I just stared at him, my voice a dry rasp. I don't have any stuff." He looked past me into the barren apartment, his expression shifting from anger to something almost like pity before hardening again. "Not my problem. You've got 1 hour. Then I'm changing the locks." He slammed the door, and I was left standing in the emptiness, truly and completely homeless. The first night on the streets was a special kind of cold I didn't know existed. It wasn't just the chill in the air, it was a deep, bone-level freeze of absolute solitude. I found a bench behind a strip mall, curled into a ball, and listened to the distant hum of the highway, the sound of a world moving on without me. Survival became a brutal, full-time job. I learned which dumpsters behind bakeries got cleared out last, yielding day-old bagels. I learned to be invisible, to avoid eye contact, to move before the cops or security could shoo me away. I spent my days in the public library, not for the warmth, though that was a bonus, but for the computers. I taught myself to code, HTML, CSS, then JavaScript. It was a world of pure logic, a welcome escape from the chaotic mess of my reality. There were no feelings in code, no betrayals. If something was broken, you could find the error and fix it. I craved that control. I'd spend hours there, my stomach growling, my clothes smelling faintly of alley, my fingers flying across the keyboard, building digital worlds that made sense. It was my only hope, a fragile life raft I was building in the middle of a storm. After months of this, I landed a gig. A small, desperate business owner needed a simple website built on a shoestring budget. I quoted him a price so low it was almost criminal, but it was money, real money. I did the work in the library, fueled by free water and sheer desperation. When I delivered the site, ahead of schedule and better than he'd hoped, he paid me and slapped me on the back. "You're a lifesaver, kid," he said. That night, I didn't sleep on a bench. I rented a bed in a grimy hostel, and as I lay there listening to strangers snore, I felt a tiny, almost forgotten ember of pride flicker inside me. It was the first step on a long, hard climb out of the abyss. That first payment was a seed. I nurtured it with an obsession that bordered on madness. I lived in the hostel, surviving on instant noodles, and poured every cent back into my fledgling business. I registered a company name, Phoenix Digital, because what else do you call something rising from ashes? The work was relentless. I was the developer, the designer, the salesman, and the janitor. But with every successful project, my reputation grew. I moved from the hostel to a shared apartment, then to a studio of my own. It wasn't much, but it had a lock on the door that was mine. The big break came 2 years later. A mid-sized tech company, impressed by a portfolio I'd built mostly with sweat and tears, hired me as a contractor to overhaul their entire user interface. The pay was more money than I'd ever seen in one place. I delivered the project flawlessly. That one contract led to another, and then another. Within 5 years, Phoenix Digital wasn't just me in a studio apartment. It was a team of 5, then 10. We moved into a real office with a view of the city. The kid who once wore his father's discarded clothes now bought custom-tailored suits. I traded the bus pass for a car, and then, in a moment of pure, surreal triumph, I signed the papers on a house. Not an apartment, a house with a yard and a mortgage and everything. The first night I slept there in the crushing silence of my own empty home, I didn't feel happy. I felt safe. For the first time in my life, I was safe. And the thick, high walls I built around that safety weren't just made of brick and mortar. 15 years. That's how long it had been. 15 years of radio silence. I'd built a life, a successful one, on the foundation of their abandonment. The sharp, hungry pain had eventually faded into a dull, permanent scar, a part of my history I rarely touched. I had therapists, a small circle of trusted friends who knew the vague outline of my past, but no one who knew the whole story. I'd even tried dating, but the moment someone got too close, the walls went up. How do you explain that your own parents are the source of your deepest trust issues? I was reviewing blueprints for a new home gym, my dog sleeping at my feet, when the doorbell rang. My security system sent a notification to my phone. I tapped the screen, expecting a delivery driver. The live feed showed 2 figures on my porch, an older man and woman, their faces weathered by time and what looked like a hard life. They were hunched against the wind, their clothes cheap and thin. It took my brain a full 10 seconds to process, to connect these worn-out strangers with the ghosts from my past. My blood ran cold. It was them. My heart didn't leap with joy or ache with nostalgia. It just stopped. Then it started again with a furious, pounding rhythm of pure, undiluted adrenaline. They'd found me. After all this time, they had the audacity to find me. I stood there, frozen, watching them on the screen as they huddled on my expensive welcome mat, the people who had left me with nothing but a pizza bill and a lifetime of issues. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. I didn't want to open the door. Every cell in my body screamed at me to ignore them, to let them stand out in the cold until they went away. But a darker, angrier part of me needed to see this. I needed to look them in the eye. I unlocked the door and pulled it open, the weight of 15 years hanging in the air between us. The woman, my mother, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes were red-rimmed and watery. "Oh, my boy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Look at you." My father stood slightly behind her, unable to meet my gaze. His shoulders slumped in a posture of defeat. He looked old, broken. Can we come in? My mother asked, her voice fragile. It's so cold out here. I didn't move from the doorway. Why are you here? My voice was flat, colder than the wind whipping around them. My mother's face crumpled. It's me, sweetheart. I'm sick, really sick. I need a heart operation. It's urgent. We have nothing. We lost our insurance. We heard you were doing well. Her words came out in a desperate, practiced rush. We're your parents. You have to help us. You can't just let me die. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it stole my breath. You have to help us. The words echoed in the silence of my foyer. After everything, after leaving me destitute, after stealing my future, they stood on my doorstep and told me what I had to do. The anger I had buried for so long finally erupted, hot and sharp. No, I said, the words simple and absolute. The last time I saw you, you left me with a bill I couldn't pay. You have no right to ask me for anything. Get off my property. I started to close the door. That's when my father's head snapped up, and his eyes, full of a desperate, cornered fury, locked with mine. We're your parents, he snarled. We'll get a lawyer. We'll take you to court and force you to pay. You have a legal responsibility to support us. You think you can just shut us out? You'll be hearing from our attorney. The threat hung in the air, ugly and final. A lawyer. They weren't just here to beg, they were here to extort. The last fragile thread of any sentimental feeling I might have harbored snapped. A lawyer? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. You want to talk about legal responsibility? Get in here, now. I stepped back, allowing them to shuffle into my foyer. They looked small and out of place, surrounded by the clean lines and quiet luxury of my home. My mother was crying softly, but I felt nothing. I was operating on pure, cold fury. I want you to listen to me very carefully, I said, my gaze fixed on my father. Before you threaten me with lawyers, you should know something. For years, I thought you were just poor, pathetic people who couldn't handle life. But I did some digging a few years back, when I had the money to hire a real investigator. Their faces went pale. My father's bluster vanished, replaced by a flicker of fear. He found some very interesting things, I continued, pulling out my phone. He found the bankruptcy filings from 2 years before you left me. Not from medical bills, not from bad luck, from gambling debts. He found records from the Lucky Star Casino, from off-track betting parlors. You weren't just poor, you were addicts. You gambled away every cent we had. I took a step closer, watching them shrink back. And then he found the real kicker. My grandmother, my mom's mom, she left me a trust fund. It wasn't a fortune, but it was $25,000, enough for college, enough for a start. It was supposed to be mine on my 18th birthday. My mother let out a choked sob. My father looked at the floor. The investigator found the withdrawal slip, dated the day after my birthday. You forged my signature. You stole from me. You took the last thing I had in the world and you ran. So please tell your lawyer that story. Tell him how you plan to sue the son you robbed blind after abandoning him. I can't wait to see the look on a judge's face. The silence in the room was absolute. The truth, finally spoken aloud, had stripped them bare. The sick mother, the desperate father, it was all a performance. They were just junkies and I was their last failed score. The facade crumbled completely. My father's defiant posture collapsed, and he seemed to physically shrink. My mother wasn't just crying now. She was weeping, great heaving sobs that sounded less like grief and more like the final surrender of a long, losing war. It wasn't like that, my father whispered, his voice ragged. It was a system. We were so close to a big win. We just needed to get back on our feet. The money, it was just a loan. We were going to pay it back 10 times over. I stared at him, disgusted. Even now, with the evidence laid bare, he was using the language of the addict, the system, the big win. There was no apology, no remorse, just the pathetic, hollow justification of a gambler who had lost everything, including his soul. You didn't just take money, I said, my voice low and steady. You took my future. You took my trust. You took any chance I had at a normal life. That $25,000 was my ladder out of the hole you dug for me, and you kicked me back down and stole the ladder. I walked to my desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a single pre-printed check. I'd had it ready for years, a morbid part of me always expecting this day. I filled in an amount. It wasn't enough for a heart operation. It wasn't enough to save anyone, but it was enough to make a point. I held it out to my father. He looked at it, a flicker of that old, hungry hope in his eyes before it died. This is not for an operation, I said, my voice cutting through the air. This is for a bus ticket out of state. This is the last money you will ever get from me. It is the last you will ever see of me. If you ever contact me again, if your lawyer so much as sends me a letter, I will not only fight it, I will press charges for the forgery and theft. I have all the documents. I will bury you. My father's hand trembled as he took the check. He didn't look at me. He just nodded, a tiny, broken movement. Now get out of my house, I said, turning my back on them, and get out of my life for good this time.